Almost got that 65 AC50 working right. A couple more parts to go. And as far as the brouhaha on the internet goes right now, with a certain company going after other companies, I've got that certain company's guitar, and I've got other companies' guitars, and the other company's guitars are better than certain companies' guitars by and large. So if certain company wants to sell more of their guitars, maybe they should just consider making them better. Because I know a guy who makes these with he has one employee in a shop about the size of my house, and is making these things with the resources of certain company. If your guitars aren't up to snuff, instead of hiring lawyers, or have I said too much? See, now here's the thing though. I could have done a video on that subject, like every other guitar channel. And I did not, because I don't chase the clicks. That's not what this channel is about. And I'll leave the industry squabbles to everyone who likes to talk about industry stuff. But at the root of the matter is the guitars that everyone's copying are the guitars of the past that were really well done, built in fairly small at a fairly small scale by people who cared. So, everybody's doing. Thanks for joining me. Sorry I started a little bit late today. I hate being late, but I got distracted by something I was dealing with at the last second, and I thought I had about 3 more minutes than I had, which is ironic since I always wear a watch. In order for the watch to help you, you have to remember to look at it, though. So, Doopity-doopity-doo. Greetings from the Netherlands. Leusden, is that how you pronounce it, Clivey? Or I hope it's Clivey. Leusden, speak of the Netherlands, I just got a collection of Bruegel the Elder's, all his paintings in a Taschen book. So after the stream, I've got that waiting for me. I love Bruegels. Doopity-doopity-doo, SoCal. Hey, Craig R. Dog Robbins. Hope your SoCal does not involve being evacuated from Orange County this morning. If anyone out there is affected by that chemical spill, our thoughts are with you. Someday I speak English good. Hey there, Stuck in the Bit from the British Isles. Got the PV stereo course running. Nice. 2 EM12s, so everyone will hear you. And the bass through a Roland keyboard amp. There you go. Hey, old guy. Hey, Chris R. There in New Jersey. Did I ever find that magic sauce which makes those crappy amps sound good? Well, it's not HP sauce, I can tell you that. I don't see how you guys eat that stuff. Let's see. Rhythm and Bites there. David coming from Atlanta. I miss Atlanta. Which would I rather be, or a wasp? Greg, you're dad joking us, right? So basically, you're doing a dad joke asking me if to be or not to be. And I'm not going to touch that one. Hey, Tobo the Hobo in Ireland. Very nice. Welcome to our crazy world. Yes, I always love it when I get a foreign word pronounced correctly. Always the slight guessing with the German and the Dutch and the Leudens and all that, but I do try. I've been wanting to try building a DIY Princeton on a PCB. Any tips? Well, I think Tube Depot sells a PCB kit for the Princeton. They've got a few kits that they sell that are on PCBs. My buddy Rob Hull designed those PCBs, and they're very, very good. So you're asking about tips for building a kit from a PCB, or about designing your own PCB? Because the answers are very different if that's the case. Let me know. I'll be here. I'm a mute the, put the AC50 in standby until I get that last bit of hum out of it. See yesterday's video. It's a little bit distracting in the background there. The amp sounds great. I just got to get that last little bit out. Victor's at the vets. Hope they don't have to put you down. Let's see. You got an H&K Tube 20 from the late 90s. Well, I hope that it sounds fantastic, and I hope it never needs work. And I'm not familiar with that model. I've only had some of their larger ones in, and the larger models have very funky proprietary designs, especially the stuff with like the illuminated plexiglass panel on the heads. But my main problem with H&K, the H&Ks that I've worked on, is that their ground connections to chassis are made with a whole bunch of quick connects, and over time they can loosen or corrode. It's the same kind of spade quick connects you find on speaker connections. So I would be careful with that kind of stuff. But when it's working, it's a good amp, and I hope that yours never has any problem. Hey, Flip McNeil, preferred blackface Princeton reverb grounding scheme. Pretty much just exactly like Leo did it. I don't make too many changes. If I'm building a new one, I build it either the way Leo did, or I emulate what Leo did as far as where the grounds are made, but I'll use screws to chassis with ground lugs. In fact, there was the Princeton that I regrounded. It was a Headstrong amp, Headstrong Princeton clone with terrible grounds. And I redid the ground scheme in that amp, and that video is not that old, like a month or so. And in that, I did what Leo did, but I did it without soldering to the chassis as much. I think I might have soldered to the chassis on that one just to see if it was doable. I think I might have done that. I've had others in though where I have redone it, or look at the way the grounds were done in that P2P amps 5E3, the Uncle Larry from a couple weeks ago, because Mike over at P2P amps did a good modern interpretation of what Leo did. Let's see. I don't like ketchup or HP sauce. Sorry. I did try the HP sauce on my full English and did not care for it. Would I say it's best to ground the cathode of an unused preamp tube, say the second shared stage in a highway? Well, the best thing to do if you have an unused triode is to connect all 3 pins of the unused triode to ground. So that's cathode, grid, and plate of the unused triode in a tube, and ground them all together. That's the best practice. On some amps, for instance, old Bassman with V3, one side was never connected to anything, and they tend to sound fine. But in terms of theoretical benefits, you want to ground all pins of an unused triode. What is my desert island amp? Well, I hope on that mythical desert island that I've got a really long extension cord. Otherwise, no amp's going to be that useful. They need power to work, and they're too small to use as a rudimentary boat. But, man, the answer changes all the time. You know, a 5E3 Deluxe is one of them. A good Deluxe reverb or Vibrolux reverb is another one of them. AC30, a really good AC30 or AC15 is one of them. I do like me some Marshall 50 watts, more the 87 than the 2204s, but you know, 2204s have their charms. But if I could choose only one, it might either be a 5E3 Deluxe or a true AC15. And those two amps have a lot of similarities. If I did not list your favorite amp on that list, it does not mean that I do not love your favorite amp or that you're wrong. Those were just some real gems that occurred to me in the moment. I have done the 1028Ks in a Princeton. I would not go to a 1028K for raunch. I think they have a 10-inch version of the Texas Heat. That would be a pretty, pardon me, that might be a good choice for what you're looking for. Yeah, Red Cross. That's on. It's. I'm not sure what the. It's not too little, too late. It's way too much, but it's also, I think, way too late. Especially since the body was ruled as you know public. Anyone in the United States, at least, can use that body shape now. It's public domain, and they're just going after the European people. It's will they win? Maybe. Do they have intellectual property rights? Possibly. It gets complicated with the different jurisdictions. Will they hurt themselves as far as their customer base goes? In a sane world, yes, but this is the same company that keeps selling apps to people that catch on fire, and people keep lining up and say, "Thank you, sir, I'd like another." So, who the hell knows? Hey, Taurus Star, you have a PCB to build the amp. You never built one, and it seems a bit intimidating. If you built a lot of pedals and your soldering skills are very good, and every pedal that you've built in the last several years has worked the first try, yeah, build the Princeton. Just be sure to double check everything as you go, and be very, very sure that everything is correct before you first apply power. You should be okay. Hey, Hamilton Rosewood, that's a good price. Alessandro or Warehouse for speaker upgrade. I've not tried the 10-inch Alessandro. I've just tried the 12, and I really like the 12. The whatever it's called, the Alessandro 12-inch. GASA 120 63 47 hike, whatever it's called. It's a great speaker. I'm not trying to make fun of it. I just can't remember random strings of letters and numbers. And I find it to be in the 12-inch version, it's very much a character speaker, and I like its character, but I have not found it to be universally something that I would always choose. I really like both the ET65 and the G12C in a deluxe reverb, for example, and I find those to be more all-purpose speakers. But for certain things, I think the Alessandro really shines. For other things, the Alessandro gets in its own way. So in a perfect world, you have more than one speaker and more than one cabinet. But as far as the 10-inch version goes, I've not tried the Alessandro 10. I love, love, love the G10C, and even more than I like the ET10, but I think the G10C in a Princeton is just perfect because a Princeton needs a little bit more, high frequencies because the cab is so mid-range forward. I think the G10C really gives it just enough little more air without being bright or painful. But these are all subjective things. Yeah, man. I mean, Chris is knocking them out of the park. And there are great Fenders out there. I've got an Eric Johnson that was my main guitar for 20 years, and I still quite like it. But I got the Eric Johnson because it was the only consistently good current production Fender that Fender makes, and it was the only Strat that Fender was making that was an actual Strat, as opposed to it's like a Strat, but this is different, or this is different, or this is different. Very confusing product catalog. And the Eric Johnson is just like, hey, this is a 56 Strat. That said, it's over 8 pounds, which is heavy for an Alder Strat. And I had to have a whole bunch of work done on it. I had to have the frets dressed. I had to have a new nut put on it. I had to change out the bridge because the bridge that comes with it sticking to the nitro, and all the knife edges were very, very poorly cut and beveled. And this K-line, there's a real advantage to have the guy whose name is on the thing do the setup, because they're going to give a shit. And it shows. Greetings, Uncle Daddy 65 from a hot London. Hey, Michael, fix it. What are some of my fave features on that Rigel scope? Hey, David, Rhythm and Bites. Mostly the fact that I can use 1 to 4 probes, and though the screen is relatively small, The definition is much better, much higher than most analog scopes. So I can, if I have 4 traces up there from 4 different probes, I can really see all 4 of them, and I can scale them so that I can easily make sense of it. And I can, what's the button called? The measure button takes all kinds of readings at once, and it goes, it's on or off. It's very easy to get that to display. And if I want to make sure that, hey, this AC50, is it putting out anywhere close to 50 clean watts? It's a great way to do that, because I can see RMS, I can see peak, I can see all kinds of figures without changing the display mode or looking at the little bitty subtext. Because sometimes on any scope, you're like, is that peak to peak, or is that RMS? And there you have, here's your peak to peak, here's your RMS, here's all the stuff it just displays, and you can even have it record it if you need to. So that scope does a lot more than I ever ask of it, but it does so much more that is useful to me than my old analog scopes did. I've got 2 scopes upstairs that are analog that would work if I were to fix them. I think I need to change out the capacitors and stuff, but you almost need to fix a scope, you need a scope. And then since I got the digital, I haven't needed to fix the old analog ones, so they just stay in the attic. They would look really cool in here, I suppose, but I have a small desk. The desk is, 5 feet by 2.5 feet. You can't really see the scale of it on the videos, but it's not a big desk. And I've got some 2 shelves on stand. One shelf has the 3 meters. I primarily use the one on the left, but it's nice to have 3 meters for things. Then the other shelf holds the scope, and sometimes I'll put a dummy load on top of the scope. And then I've got all my tools underneath. So it's a very small, cluttered at the moment, but efficient desk for one man to work at. And it doesn't take up a lot of space because I have amps everywhere. Hey, Martin, cool. I'm glad that's working for you. I only put out 214, huh? Well, should work fine for most purposes. For practice, at least. Hey, Cat's Music Journey. Hey, Klaus Leah. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Heater-derived relay power supplies causing imbalance in heaters. Is that normal? Well, it depends. A lot of the Mark IIs use carbon composite resistors for all kinds of things. So that's one of the first steps I do with almost any mesa, is replace all the carbon comps in the power supply, anything related to that, with at least metal oxides or metal film, something that's really going to be stable and not affected by humidity and temperature, or prone to drifting. I've never had issues with an imbalance in the heaters caused by the relay driven power supply. I mean, but I could see how it could be the case. In which case, I don't have the part number handy, and there aren't that many. I think I got it from DigiKey. I put in 2 watt 100 ohm pot, and there was only like 3, and I chose one. It was like $11, and I had been using that just as a break glass in case of testing purposes. And then I would test it, measure, find where any amp needed to have its heater ratio, find what standard resistors would recreate that ratio. So instead of 100 ohm, it might be 120 ohm and 80 ohm, whatever. And then do that, send an amp out. But that 65 AC50 is worth enough that putting an $11 pot in it made sense. So it's going home with the amp. I'll have to get another one of those. But if you pick one of those up, all you do is you get the 100 ohm pot, put 2 47 ohm half watt resistors in series with either side of the pot. So if something were to fail, it'd be one of the resistors, not the pot. And then you can measure, just turn it until the buzz goes away. If the buzz goes away, you disconnect it, you measure what the resistance is, taking account those 47 ohms. You're like, okay, I need 140 ohm and a 62 ohm or whatever. And then you put those in and life goes on. If that makes sense. Hey, Stuck, is there any reason besides cost regarding Fender not historically producing as many amp heads as combos? Well, most people back then did not have roadies, though they probably aspired to it. And a combo is much easier to load into the family car, or if you're a gigging musician, into the taxi. And they're very, if you're toting around a twin, no one's going to ever say, "Oh, that's not loud enough." By the time you need something louder than a single twin will give you, you'll probably have roadies, and then you get into people having stacks of dual showmen. And now, if you talk to them about what it was like playing back then, they say, I'm sorry, what?" To this day, combos are much more practical for most people. The Bandmaster was an interesting thing on the market. I don't understand why the Bandmaster and Tremolux really exist, but they did. Because for not much more money, you could get the more full-featured amp as far as having reverb and tremolo. And speakers, and not have to carry around separate things. But some people just, I think, like the looks of the piggyback setup. So, hey, Michael Fixit recently finished restoring a 66 AB165. You're welcome on that bypass cap trick. Also did a negative feedback defeat. Good. All right, though I think the amp probably, I've never heard anyone say an AB165 does not have enough gain. Let's get rid of the negative feedback. But if it floats your boat, won't do any harm. Normal channel volume buzzy and middle only. 10 and 1 both okay. That is the classic sign of a ground loop. If you're buzzy in the middle of the volume range and go at full or zero, the buzz goes away. That's a ground loop. Now, most Fenders, including most AB165s, do not have a ground loop built in. But you could have a poor connection to chassis, either at the pot or one of the cathode wires going to the brass strip by the panels. Or it could be a matter, no, it's going to be a ground loop. It's not going to be anything else endemic to the AB165. You saw me find that ground loop with the same symptom. I don't remember which video it was, maybe video 6, video 7 on this AC50. There's been so many little videos on it. But that's one of the things I showed you, that this channel had no heater buzz, had no buzz on it. This channel had a whole bunch of buzz on it. and the buzz in the middle was really bad. Buzz at 0, buzz at 10 was very, very minor. That's a classic sign of a ground loop. And in this case, I had to go through there and change the way all the grounds were done in the amp, because it's a Vox and they never had it quiet from the factory. Something's up with your AB165. Some ground is not being made as well as it could, or someone has made some other changes. Like in the later 70s amps, they would have a ground wire used, spiraling around the other wires going from, say, to the tone stack. And on some of them, they would have it only connected at the chassis side, and then the spiral would just be a shield. But on some of them, they'd have it connected to the chassis side and to, say, a cathode connection on the board, but that cathode already had a path to ground through the brass strip. So you had redundant grounds of unequal length there, and that creates ground loops in the later 70s Fenders. The farther CBS took it from what Leo designed, the worse the noises got. I'm not sure why you have a ground loop in your AB165, but that is the classic sign of it. So make sure that the ground scheme in your amp is exactly as it would have been in 1965, with no modifications, no changes. And also make sure that starting in 65, Fenders started using the solder connections for all the main grounds to the hardware, the little ground lugs that held on by the hardware that holds a power transformer in place. Whereas before that, they were making them to chassis. It's very rare for me to find a 65 and later Fender where those grounds are still good. The chassis bends over time from the weight of the transformer. The connection gets bad. Even if the connection looks like it's good, dirt gets in there, you have bad grounds, and that could also be the cause of your issue. So get all that stuff out. If you have a soldering iron capable of it, I use that 80-watt Weller just for that. I recreate the grounds to the chassis. If you don't have that, remove the nuts holding the ground lugs to the chassis. Clean all the metal very thoroughly and put everything on really tight, as tight as you can, and you'll have good grounds for the next 5-10 years. Hey there, Bill. Oh man, I thought I'm not sure what's going on with else. I don't want to speculate, but I had heard that Fender had lost the Stratocaster body shape in the United States a long time ago. That it was public domain, but they're going after the European people. But I don't know what's going on. Hey, Jorge. Greetings from Houston. Well, greetings from Memphis, Jorge. Thoughts on the expensive VK Butler tube driver for Gilmore's slight overdrive tone? Alternatives, thanks. Yeah, the blues driver is really not that good at sounding a pedal. Its most famous users are Gilmore and Eric Johnson. So right off the bat, really good players. Gilmore's were all modified by Pete Cornish, so who knows how much of what Gilmore uses is actually Butler versus Cornish. And I think Eric Johnson is using them to get a little more oomph out of some lower gain Marshalls he uses, not as Fender. And Gilmore is, I think, using them with high watts and Fenders. But again, Gilmore's had Cornish go through them, so I would not recommend one of those for that sound. Odds are, if you can't get the sound you're after with a Boss blues driver or what used to be a cheap pedal, the Noble's OD1, not cheap anymore, but there are clones of it that are inexpensive. Then the expensive tube driver would not do it for you either. It's a marketing tube. It has there's no magic to that circuit. It's just a light overdrive. Put it this way. You would sound like yourself playing into Eric Johnson's rig or Gilmore's rig. They'd be fine with any of their strats into a Boss Blues driver into a deluxe reverb. They'd sound just like themselves. So, gear can get in your way, but gear cannot propel you to greater heights. Does that make sense? So there are a lot of guys who are capable of playing better and sounding better than they do because their gears actually get in their way. But to go from being a really damn good player to an Eric Johnson or a David Gilmour is not the gear holding you back at that point. Any experience with a 10K reverse audio taper pot and the trem intensity on an AB763 to get a slower trem versus increasing cap values? Well, the intensity is not going to give you a slower or faster trem. The intensity is going to give you more or less tremolo, and changing the value, the stock ones is 100K or 50K. 50K. If you go from 50K to 10K, all that's going to happen is your vibrato channel is going to lose some low end because you've taken a 50K resistor to ground and replaced it with a 10K resistor to ground. And so you're going to have a higher high pass frequency in the output of that section, where the 100 nanofarad cap takes the output of that channel, and that 50K pot is your ground reference. So there's no benefit to doing that. If you want to slow the trem, you need to increase the capacitors in the LFO. That in stock form is 20-10-10. You can go 20-20-10. You can go 30-20. You can go 30-10-10. You can go 30-20-10. If you go too large, you don't have any the tremolo. If you go too small, you'll have no range. The reason we don't change the pot to increase, to slow the tremolo speed in an old Fender is because there is no reverse audio or otherwise pot suitable for the intensity purpose, the speed purpose on the market than the 3 meg reverse audio. You can't find a 10 meg reverse audio, which would give you 3 times as slow, so twice as slow a sound. But you can change the capacitors. So if you change, say, to like 30, 20, 10, you're going to have really deep, slow tremolo. And then if you want to make your fastest speed closer to what it used to be, change the 100K limiting resistor on that 3 meg reverse audio pot to like a 56 or 47K, and then your fastest speed will be closer to what it used to be, but your slowest speed will be a lot slower. The other trick is to change the 22 microfarad cathode bypass gap on V5B down to a 4.7 microfarad or 5 microfarad, which is what they actually were in a lot of the 60s amps, though the schematic still said 25. And that way, as you change the intensity on the pot, the actual tremolo will change at the same time, as opposed to stop, kind of dropping out and then catching up. That's a lot of secret sauce at once. No HB sauce, but secret sauce. So if you guys want to write all that down, 10. Did you say 10 meg? I thought I read 10K. You said 10K, but yeah, 10 meg speed pots. If there are 10 meg pots out there, you would probably only find them in linear or A taper. To get 10 meg reverse audio made for you, no problem. CTS, Alpha, Burns, any of those companies will be glad to make you 10 meg reverse audio taper pot, but they're also going to want you to buy about 9,999 others, and that's where it gets problematic. If you go to Mojotone, for instance, and say, I want to buy the Mojotone Vintage Taper 500K or 250K pot, all that is a 30% taper, audio taper pot, J taper, made with a certain taper that does not drop out below 8 o'clock, below 9 o'clock, and made for them by CTS. And CTS makes it to their spec, and they even stamp Mojotone on the back of the case. And you can have one made that says John Q. Public, but you would have to have another 9,999 to afford the one, and so Mojotone, companies like that, Alessandro has a similar relationship with PEC. You buy an awful lot of them, and they'll make you whatever you want. So, but the rest of us are just stuck with the existing 3 meg reverse audio, and that's fine because we can increase the value of the capacitors in the LFO and get to the same place. Hey, Sash, just 1 second. I got a dry throat today. In what types of amps would I consider doing DC elevated heaters? Is it always necessary or variable from amp to amp? Usually, I don't reach for that first. Like on this AC50, I had 3 levels of ground of heater issue. There are a lot of noise issues on this AC50, but one layer of it was the heater issue. Part of it was that the lead dress was bad. Part of it was that the AC wiring to the preamp tubes was run on opposite sides of the tubes. So if a wire came close to this side of the heaters, it wasn't all equidistant from the other side of the heater. So it would just get half the waveform, Let me explain this better. On an AC signal like heaters, you have one wire and the other wire, and they're out of phase with each other. So if you have another wire which comes near both of them, it's going to pick the noise from both of them up at the same time, and the noise from each of them is out of phase noise from the other one, so they're not going to eject their noise into the third wire. But if you move those out of phase ones over here, and this wire comes close to this heater wire but not this heater wire, then all of a sudden the noise from this heater wire is picked up by this third wire. So that's why people are like, you need tightly twisted heater wires. It's not about the twist, though it's convenient to keep them very close together. You want to have, if a wire is going to come near your heater connection, for it to come near both at the same time. So I fixed that, and then I moved all the grids away from that, because grids are sensitive even to picking up when it's canceling out. And then also had the imbalance in the the secondary windings. Pardon me. The places where I will either do a DC elevated heater or, well, I'll get to the other option. If I have an amp which has cathode bias, for instance, that P2P amps 5E3, the Uncle Larry, it's cathode biased. Well, okay, I moved the ground reference from ground. I moved the heater balance reference from ground, which is 0 volts, to the output cathode, which is like 20 volts. That's a 20 volt DC lift that's free in a deluxe, a Tweed Deluxe or similar cathode biased amps. Same for an AC15, AC30. So there's a free DC elevation present in a cathode biased amp. I will often take advantage of that. I've done that in amps going back. I had an Oahu from 1948. It was cathode bias. I did the same thing. The other time I will add one into an amp which does not have any free, DC point like you find in cathode bias. I've had several Marshall 2203, 2204s, etc. That 10K unbypassed cathode on V1, well, it's V1A as far as the physical build of the amp, but it's this, the second gain stage, the one only used by the clean channel. A lot of current production tubes, specifically Russian tubes, are very susceptible to that unbypassed 10K cathode picking up heater noise. Even when everything else in the heater circuit is perfect, it picks up, that AC signal just couples on to the cathode and goes to the grid, and you hear it through the entire amp. On those amps, I have two solutions. I can install a full DC power supply just for V1 and V2. And there are new switch mode supplies that are available. You can drop into an amp fairly easily that do that. Or I can install 2 resistors and a capacitor and take, say, the phase inverter node, and then do a voltage divider that gets me down to about 50 to 70 volts DC positive. And then I'll use like a 10 microfarad 150 volt cap across that to ground. That's because the first resistor in the voltage divider also is decoupling, so you have a new filtering node, so that's kind of isolated from everything else. And then I'll reference the heaters to that new 50 to 70 volt DC point that I've created. So you might have a 470K resistor and a 100K resistor to get from the phase inverter voltage down to 65 volts or whatever. That's perfect range. And that's a really good way to do it with minimal parts. And you can usually do that on a lot of the old 2203s, 2204s, etc. There's some unused holes on the PCB down by the power transformer end that were for installing turrets for universal connections for the European models, and they were never populated in the US models. And so you've got some holes there. You just put a terminal strip mounted right to it and add 2 resistors and a cap, and done. Another bunch of secret sauce. I'm giving away all my secrets. You'll all be as pretty as me. That won't take long. Why did my Marshall 1986 work momentarily with its primaries backwards? What a wild goose chase. It didn't let out a scream, so... Well, you don't always get a scream. Be glad that you don't always get a scream. You will always get some form of oscillation. It's not going to be a pleasant sound. It's going to fall apart pretty quick. And if you find the right combination of settings, you will get screams. But yeah, when I'm building an amp for the first time, or if I had to change a transformer, or if I get a kit build in, the first thing I will do is I will disconnect the negative feedback supply, if it's an existing amp. Or if I'm building the amp, I make sure that I leave the primaries extra long. So if I get hot and blue backwards, if the diagram doesn't match the actual amp, the transformer, whatever, I'm not locked in. And I'll build the amp without negative feedback. And I'll leave those connections to the plates long. And then I will have the amp on, the dummy load, and I'll have the master volume as low as I can get away with while still hearing the amp. And then I will connect the negative feedback wire, and at the first sign of oscillation or squeal, I disconnect it. I'm like, oh, gotta flip them plates. Or everything seems good, let's turn it up, turn it up. All right, let's if everything's still stable, all right, we got lucky. There are ways to measure it, but it's almost faster just to see, is that correct or is that correct? And then once I'm sure that, hey, that's blue, that's brown, I can neaten up those wires and shorten the lengths and all that. Why not sell the scopes languishing in my attic? Well, because they don't work right now. They would need to be fixed before I could sell them with a clean conscience. I don't know what's wrong with them, so I don't know whether I assume they're fixable. Most things are, but I don't want to sell something and then someone says, hey, it's all effed up, it's not worth anything. Then I've got to give them their money back and there's shipping losses. I also don't want to deal with selling something on eBay and all the fees and all that to make, what, you make $20 selling an old scope? So, I mean, I could probably take it to a ham fest, but then I'd have to go to a ham fest, so, which is just marginally better than a sausage fest, though they're often the same thing. Hey, Greg Meyer. Coincidentally, just put a G10C in my 68 Princeton reissue. Sounds great. I concur. I heard you say at some point you don't like the 68 Princeton reissue. Well, I'm not a fan of the 68 Princeton reissue because all it is a 65 reissue that they've made sound bad in comparison. They gave it more mids. Okay, well, the amp already had a lot of mids. They gave it less negative feedback. Well, the amp kind of needs negative feedback. They gave it a little less reverb. Why would you give it less reverb? It's not as bad as the Deluxe and Twin and Super 68 Customs, because on those, they put reverb and trim on both channels in such a way to give the amp a really high noise floor. The 68 is factory modded, factory modded 65, and the mods aren't very good, and they're not done that well. It's not a bad amp, but it could have been as nice as the 65, but they chose not to. It is a pretty amp with the silver. I love the look of the silver panel 68s, and it's not a bad sounding amp. It's just not as nice as the 65, and I don't understand why Fender made those changes. There are different ways to do that. If you want to, well, maybe I shouldn't tell them that because they're being such asses to everyone else in the industry right now. But if you want to make a more flexible custom Deluxe Reverb or custom Princeton, stop with what you're doing. Stop the bullshit. Give it a mid spot on the back and a mid spot that can do some boost and make the boost switchable. Players can actually use that. Anyway. Yeah, I got a Tektronix and a Tandy. I think I've got a Tandy upstairs. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to turn it on because it takes a while to boot and the fan noise drives me nuts. I don't like using the Rigel because the fan is kind of loud, but that's the only downside to it. But you can see the screen from here. If I were to focus on it, which I'm not, it's focused on me because I'm the important one here. You could read it across the room, and you can't say that from old Tektronix and stuff. The Tektronix are great for, if you've got a wall of them and then you love them, you're absolutely right. There's absolutely nothing wrong with an old analog scope. Hey, Daniel Lang from Cleveland. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate you, man. You go towards the coffee fund. Hey, Breath Time Breath. Thoughts on 82 to 84 to 92 Fullerton's Stratocaster 62 reissues? I used to have one. I had an 89 62 reissue. That was a really good guitar. It's different than the later ones are not Fullertons. Fullertons were just the first year or two, 82 to 84. But I think this may be a surprise to people. I think the 89s are in some ways better guitars, and the 83s are in other ways better guitars. Neither is completely accurate. The later 90s ones have thinner necks, little more trying to keep up with the times than the 60s necks. And the 82 to 83 Fullertons have certain details that are wrong in comparison to the originals, but they sound great. My buddy Steve Selvage has an 83 burst with two-tone burst with maple neck, and it's aged beautifully. But any of those guitars they made up to about 92, as far as the American reissue series, are really nice guitars. It's just the later 80s ones have a little bit thinner necks. Now, there were some 60s Strats that had necks like that, but not that many. But, you know, at the time, what was dominating the market? Ibanez and Charvel and stuff like that. Jackson. So it was the late 80s were the era of thin, wide Strat necks. And so the 89-ish 63 issues went a little bit in that direction. Hey, Colby Jack, thanks for joining us. Question, tube driver alternative, overdriven preamp from 1 amp acting as a pedal by connecting. I'm not even going to keep reading that. Stop. Don't overcomplicate yourself. You don't want to run the output of 1 amp into another amp. It's asking for more trouble than it's worth. Just 1 second. It's worth it. All right, clean Strat, clean 65 AC50 in this case. Now it's a little out of tune because I didn't tune up before I started the stream. And I'm not saying those are necessarily the sounds of your dreams. I got one sound there I didn't really like, but the first one, when I just turned on the overdrive pedal, it's an overdrive pedal. If you don't like that one, there's a million others on the market. So much simpler than running in 1 amp into another amp and you're getting ground lift issues and potential of damaging things. Don't make your life hard. Get some overdrive pedals, and they don't have to be what Gilmore used or expensive or esoteric. It can be a blues driver and a SS. You know, you want the yellow Boss or you want the orange Boss. You know, that stuff works too. Sorry, I thought that stack might have sounded better, but that stack, which sounds really good into a Marshall, that stack does not sound good into the Vox. Sounds good into a 5E3 though. That was stacking a modded Klon into a Zen drive. The first sound that I liked was just the Zen drive. I thought the Zen drive and the AC50 got along splendidly. Yeah, Michael, fix it. Just double check what you did. Make sure you don't have an obvious ground loop, but your problem description, that's almost always a ground loop. Drop-in solid-state rectifier or tube rectifier, advantages, disadvantages. Well, the drop-in advantage is that it doesn't generate heat or very much, and it won't crack or break very easily. The disadvantage is that it's going to sound and feel a little bit different, and you're going to have the amp rebiased if you go from tube to solid state. And if you go from solid state to tube, you'll still need to have your amp rebiased. The amp will sound a little bit different, feel a little bit different with a tube rectifier. And the tube rectifier throws out a lot of heat, and that of tube failures, the rectifier tube is almost the most common, if not the most common. So, if I design a new amp, I don't design it to use tube rectification, but neither do I use a drop-in solid state. I just built it, and you can emulate a rectifier tube these days. But like the Weber copper cap is fine as long as the amp is biased appropriately. Thanks, Stuck in the Bit. That means a lot to me. I appreciate that. You know, thank you for putting up with my lousy stacked sound there as the guitar went out of tune. I was expecting it to have a bit more oomph. That AC50's got a 12AY7 in V1. I'm sorry, 12AU7 in V1. And so it, it's like, oh, you want me to overdrive? Not feeling it. If I do the same trick into that 5E3 with stacking those pedals, it turns into a Marshall. But thank you very much. Appreciate that, man. There you go. Well, that resonated on B and C bar chords. That's oscillation. It'll still work. It's just not going to be working healthily. It's a bad sound, but not all reverse primaries gives you the scream and the squeal. If you turn the presence all the way down, you would have probably had some real severe instability. Ooh, old 90s Superjet. It would be worthwhile to just upgrade the speaker as long as you get a speaker that doesn't cost a ton. Because it's only so good that amp's going to sound. I'm sorry to tell you this. But yeah, the stock speaker is usually not great. P12Q is not a bad choice. I'm not sure what the P12Q costs this week. But, there are a lot of good choices, but I'd have to... I don't know what all of them would be that would be justifiable. I imagine there's a lot of used $50 speakers that would be fantastic, and some new speakers that don't cost much more than $70 would be fantastic. But don't spend $200 on a speaker, etc., for a Superjet. Hey, Dale Boyle. Avoid any of the Fender Eric Clapton series because it's the Fender Custom Shop, and they have long since lost the secret recipes. Their stuff is really expensive to not be very good. If you want the real deal, what something like Derek would have Derek and the Dominoes album would have actually used back in '71, whatever it was, that Dwayne actually played through. Look at Victoria for a champ build. You'll spend a lot less, you'll get a lot more, and it'll sound right, and it'll last, and it's better built. As far as the Tone King Imperial Mark II, they're very nice amps, but they're totally different than any champ. I mean, the Imperial Mark II is basically Mark's version of a twin with a little zhuzh. And it's a wonderful amp. It's a great amp. I like that amp a lot. Tone King, I had, what was it, the Skylighter or something that had a lot of problems. We had a lot of issues with that where the board was wanting to catch on fire. But I've got their Royalist Mark III here right now. Really well built, really good sounding amp. So the Imperial is fantastic. But avoid any Eric Clapton series or Fender Custom Shop anything when it comes to amps, because you're just paying for the brand. You're not paying for any particular ability to build amps these days, which is sad. MOD or Mojotone for Deluxe Reverb Tank. Hey, Mr. Anderson. I would go with Mojotone Medium Decay. It's going to sound the most like mid-60s long decay Accutronics. Now, I was contacted by the guy who runs Surfy Bear Industries in an email, and he was saying what he enjoyed the video I did on the Fender reverb unit, and he wanted to know if I wanted to do a partnership kind of thing, if they send me some stuff to feature. And at the risk of offending him, I said, I tried one of your tanks. I thought it sounded really good, but I'm concerned about its roadworthiness because it's being built for you by Belton Accutronics, and they have pretty terrible connections. It's very common for modern Belton Accutronics tanks. They come in and the amp's 6 months old and a spring's broken inside the bag, or the tiny little wires going to the quick connects have broken off the quick connects because they're built like crap, or the plastic RCA jacks have broken. And that's not a reflection on Surfy Bear. That's Accutronics Belton, who are building really cheap tanks these days. And Surfy Bear is having tanks made to their spec by Belton Accutronics. And the Surfy Bear tanks do sound fantastic. And I told the guy at Surfy Bear that. I was like, hey, I'm sorry that you've had to partner with Belton and you're inheriting some of their issues. Now, the guy from Surfy Bear said, hey, we've sold thousands of these and have not had these issues. So maybe they're getting lucky. Maybe Belton's doing a better job on their contract work than they are on the stuff they put out under their own name. So another option for you to consider is the Surfy Bear Industries tank, which does sound fantastic. I tried it on like a super reverb. I have concerns about the longevity of that tank, but because it is built at the Belton Accutronics factory. I could be wrong. I do know that the tank is really, really sounds good, and I think his name was Sergio, is proud of his work and has put in a lot of work to get this project going. So if for those for whom a $70 tank or $75 tank versus a $35 tank is too much of a price disparity, go with the MOD medium decay. Not the MOD, sorry, the Mojotone. Mojotone medium decay. If you need one in a pinch, sure, get the MOD or the Ruby. They're okay, but they're much longer decay and they sound too dark. But if you want to take a chance on a really good sounding tank and $75 is not that big a deal to you, and you're okay with the idea that, hey, it may sound great, but it may need to have its wires redone, or it could fail, may need to be replaced in 3 years, or it could last 20 years, because I'm just saying, then the Surfy Bear would be the one I would vote for in terms of sound. But I cannot say that Surfy Bear is going to be as well made or as long lasting. I can't say that it will break. I'm just saying that most of its younger brothers, its little brothers in the Belton Accutronics line, do fail. So I think the Surfy Bear is definitely worth checking out, so long as you're in the kind of income bracket where if a $75 part only lasts a few years, no sweat, it's worth it for the sound, I'll get another one. Not everyone, I just want everyone to make that math decision for themselves. Hopefully that's fair. And I wish that I didn't have to put any caveats on that, because the Surfy Bear tanks sound great. They sound almost as good as the old Gibbs. By the way, Fenders used Gibbs tanks before they switched to Accutronics, and the early Accutronics tanks were the same tank that the Gibbs made. I'm not sure if the company was bought out or what, but I hope that was fair. It's tough to be fair and honest on these things, because it just sounds like you're just being a negative asshole if you're not just loving everything. But, I know that for some people, a $75 whatever, well, that's only $75. It sounds great. If it breaks, I'll get another one. Other people, man, I've spent $75 on that and it only lasted 2 years. That's a thing. Hey, Shaky Pete. It is a C, just like I said in the video. It's a C. It's a C with Novel tubes. So it's a transition. Before they came out, they had moved to the Novel tubes, but they hadn't changed over to the D circuit yet. And someone in the comments was saying, I would say that's a D. I'm like, well, you can say it all you want, but I've got the goddamn thing on my bench, and every aspect of it is a C. It's a C board with C components, with a C circuit. It just has Novel sockets instead of octal sockets. Do I have any opinions on Mercury transformers? Yeah, they're great. I had a really good relationship with Pat at Mercury, and then he died during COVID, which was heart-wrenching. And I don't have the same relationship with the company that I used to have. But no, Mercury makes great stuff. Mercury gets a bum rap in a lot of the internet because they're expensive. And they are expensive if you're buying from them as an individual. If you're buying OEM or a dealer rate, I still get dealer rate. The cost per unit is not that much higher than Hammond or Haybor, and they're very, very good. Now, I know Dave Friedman, whom I respect, doesn't like the sound of their Marshall output transformers compared to the Haybors and others that he uses. And that's fine. I subjectively have found them to sound very good. I will say, though, that for most companies, if you have a Marshall amp and you need a new output transformer, you have a choice of that company's 50-watt Marshall output transformer or that company's 100-watt output transformer. With Mercury, you can say, hey, I've got a 66 that use KT66s, and they'll say, oh yeah, that was that Drake that was only made for 7 months. We've got the blueprint for that. We'll make you one. You can get their reproduction of a radio spares, pop that in an AC 30, and go to Yardbird's heaven. So they have a lot of things that other companies don't make, but their scale of production, as a result, per model is relatively low because the guitar side of their company is a relatively small part of their transformer business. So if you go to Haybor and you want an output transformer, well, they only make two 50-watt. They only make two output transformers from Marshall, the 50-watt or the 100-watt, and they just did a batch of 500 of the 50-watt, so you pay $180, whatever it is. Mercury, well, they just did a batch of 10 of that one, and so you're going to pay normally $300. Or I buy it, and I'm $200 versus the $180 for the Haybor. It's usually pretty close. For a lot of amps, if there's an existing part from Haybor or Hammond, back in the day, Classic Tone, I'll use those. Though back in the day when Classic Tone was going, I did find that a lot of the mounting flanges on Classic Tone transformers were very flimsy and needed a lot of reinforcement, whereas the Mercury stuff was built like a tank. So I have different opinions on Mercury than a lot of people, but I also don't view them as magic. It's not like, oh, only this company has the secret sauce. And that works for all those who attack Mercury because they have, oh my God, they have plastic bobbins as opposed to paper bobbins. Well, plastic makes a lot more sense if you're thinking about what a transformer needs to do. Other people ascribe all kinds of magic to the sound of a paper bobbin, and these people need to get laid. I don't say that very often. I don't say that lightly. It's just the most boring thing in the world to obsess about. I mean, my God, train spotters. Hey, yeah, Steve. Let me swap out that Rivera for the Princeton. We'll get to work on that. I appreciate you very much. Hey, Arnaud, thank you very much. I don't have a specific series. Basically, every time I do that, I go to Mauser, and I've got some videos on that that are called they're boring. It's under Tech Tips, how to order parts at Mauser. Anyway, I say, all right, I want some 22 microfarad caps. I like them to be 450 or 500 volts rated, and I want something that's going to be rated for 10,000 to 12,000 hours, and I want of what's left. I want what's going to have the best deal with ripple current the best. All right, what's the lead spacing? What's the physical size? They've got usually 2 or 3 almost identical parts for each one of these things, but you can go get something. All right, it's 105 degree Celsius rated, 450 volt cap that's supposed to last 12,000 hours. That's a good cap, and it's going to be oblivious to ripple current, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't know which series that is. Sorry. And somehow my old orders, my parts lists on Mauser got deleted. I don't know, not sure what happened, but I had all these saved parts projects, and they're all gone. And I got to talk to Mauser to see if they have a way to restore them from their database. So a lot of things like that, the part numbers that I use, the series that I use, I don't know now. I don't have access to my saved carts and saved projects. So anyway, we are at the top of, well, we're a little bit past the top of the next hour. We're going to take the first of 2 7-minute intermissions, and we will come back. So 7 minutes. Everyone stretch your legs, get a sandwich, get some coffee, what you need to do. See you in a few. Just getting the guitar back in tune in case I need to play something else awful for you. The weather's been changing so much with all the storms coming through. The Strat was a little bit sharp, which would be fine if it would do like a trans trim and all go up by exactly half a step, but it wants to be all Stockenhauser on us. Stockhauser. Ah, a sharp G. Happens to the best of us. Happens to me too. This guitar stays in tune really well once it's there. And the nuts cut really well. It's just a matter of sneaking up from beneath, which sounds like a very different kind of channel. That's nice. That's very nice. I want to get rid of that last bit of buzz in that AC50. Will never darken my door again. Dang it. That's trouble is when I get them just right and then they go off and they see other people. Let's see. Yeah, David's got a point there. If you want to play around with LEDs instead of cathode resistors and cathode bypass caps, because you don't need resistor and a cap if you use an LED, trick is just to find the voltage drop that you need, and then the resistor. You know, like, hey, I want this to be 1.8. Well, this red one's 1.8. I want it to be 2.1. Well, this yellow one is 2.1, or white one, whatever. And plus, if you mount them on the front panel instead, then the front panel kind of lights up in interesting ways as you play. There's a lot of things you can do. The only issue with using LEDs is it's a full frequency, so there's no, there's no shelving, there's no dumping everything below 30 hertz or dumping everything below 200 hertz, whatever you might do with standard cathode resistor parallel with the cap tricks. Everything is going to be full frequency. So the LEDs for replacing cathode setups does have that one limitation. Because the first thing, when you find out you can just use red LEDs for everything, you're like, oh my God, it'll be beautiful. But they don't always work for everything you need, which makes us sad. Pardon me. Never buy Weber kits, never buy Weber parts, never buy Weber chassis. The Weber speakers are great, but that's the only thing that says Weber you should get. Well, the speakers and the charcoal grills, but I think the spelling might be different. Oh, I was very lucky in a lot of ways in that I have been lucky in my life in that if I read something or I hear something, I retain it. I can't take credit for it. It's like a party trick. I absorb information very quickly. I cannot recite long strings of letters and numbers like the Alessandro GASC 6457 whatever speaker. I think I might have accidentally said it somewhere in that string, but so little things like that irk me. But in general, I get stuff. I grok. And systems have always been very obvious to me. I used to do IT stuff, databases, website design, operating systems, programming language. They're all systems. And if it's like little flowcharts, if then else, it's all that kind of stuff. And all that, I've just always kind of had an advantage on that stuff has always been very apparent to me and understandable. So I had less of a learning curve in some ways. And other ways, I had a big learning curve because I never had any math past basic high school stuff on math. I was never interested in math. And now I do math a lot. I have found many uses for pi. But then as I started to get more seriously into it, early days of Usenet, I was very lucky in that I was able to talk to guys like John Suhr and some others you won't know who in different aspects of the audio industry in general. And they were very kind and gave me a lot of information. But at the same time, most of what I do here is really basic stuff, stuff that comes from the 30s and 40s. Even the solid state stuff is I'm not going in there and reprogramming CMOS chips and stuff if I get a digital amp in, but like looking at the switching on that Tone King, the PNP and NPN transistors they use are no longer being made. They're not recommended for new design at Mauser because everything's going to surface mount. But so I am like peak 1963 technology. I couldn't get you to the moon and back. So have any of you guys ever looked at how the engines on the Apollo Saturn rockets actually worked? Amazing, amazing, amazing. All those little bitty magnets, all those little bitty magnetized cores. And just like analog perfection at an insanely dangerous level. Hey, Greg Brown, 5E3 kit, no tubes? Yeah, sure. Get a new old stock Joint Army Navy 12AY7. They've got those at Phillips from the 70s at Tube Depot for like $28-30. There's your 12AY7. Electro Harmonics 7025 for the other tubes, other Novel tubes, the preamp tubes. A pair of Electro Harmonics 6V6 GTs, and a new old stock Joint Army Navy 5Y3. If you can't get that, get the JJ 5Y3 because the Softtech 5Y3 is really a GZ34, and all your voltages will be wrong. Thank you, Sergio. I appreciate that. We're going to do another one on nuts, and you can go play with those. But no, I don't know. He's going to be alternating between me and David Barber on that series, and maybe at some point David and me at the same time, which would be interesting because I talk too much and David doesn't speak enough. So it might be an interesting stream. I'll have to really restrain myself. David's a really knowledgeable guy, really smart, knows his shit. He's just not as much of a people person as I am. And I think he would agree with that. I'm always open to collabs with good people. Keith certainly qualifies as that. The only frustrations that I had from that stream is for some reason, Keith had my audio way too loud. I was broadcasting exactly the same levels that I send out now. I just used this setup and send it to Keith. For some reason, he had hit my level up much hotter than his, so I sounded like I was shouting the entire time, which is embarrassing, and it was a little bit distorted. And something about his internet connection made all the guitar stuff I was trying to demonstrate sound a little bit garbled on playback, especially for some reason when I went to the 335. So some of those points were kind of lost, and I was glad that I just was doing G and C chords, given the nature, the level of players that were on that stream and watched that stream, and how bad the guitar sounded. So, that's part of the fun of doing this stuff live. Sometimes it just doesn't work. Hey, good. Never tried a 5AR4 Horizon from Pisvane. Would not try Pisvane anything. But if they're on fire, I'd Pisvane on them. All right, if it didn't have the ground loop and now it does, probably some hardware is loose or something's corroded, depending on the age of the amp. Now, David, you got to stop reading my mind before, way ahead of the fact, because you nailed it, man. But yeah, the JJ 12AY7 is quite good, but you can still get the Joint Army Navy Phillips stuff from the 70s for good prices there. Maybe I shouldn't tell people that. Maybe I should get them all for myself. Thank you, Mike S. You know what's even better than brewing your coffee? Brewing some of the coffee that David's wife makes. See a couple streams back. David, you want to pop the name down there? It's really good stuff. In my case, though, it was that Nikki was kind enough to make you make this cup of coffee for me during the intermission. Speaker suggestion for a 5E3. Well, that gets really tricky. In fact, I'm going through that right now. I've got this P2P amps, Uncle Larry here, and I didn't care for the sound with the Celestian Gold that was in it. And the owner wanted me to try a Creamback 65, which is what's in there now, and I'm not sold on it, but it's a brand new speaker, needs some more playing in. And so I'm comparing the Celestian, well, not the Celestian, I'm comparing the Creamback 65 that's in it to playing the same amp through my cab, which has got a Veteran 30 and an ET65. And then I've got that 54 or 55 actual 5C tweed here, which has got a reissued Jensen P12Q in it. And of the speakers I've played that circuit through so far, I'm liking the Jensen, and I'm liking the ET65 a lot. And the Creamback 65, I'm hearing a little bit more mid-range in the nasal area, and maybe just the pairing with the cabinet. But I want to play around with that speaker some more, give it a little more break-in, because it's not fair to take a out-of-the-box stiff Celestian and compare it to the 65, which has been played on the channel for like 5-6 years, and the P12Q, which has certainly a lot of playing hours on it. I don't know how long. Little Waves coffee, yeah, Ethiopian coffee, Little Waves. David's wife in Atlanta is making that, and it's really, really nice. And I recommend it highly. And I apologize to her that I forgot the name of the brand, because the bag of beans, actually not that many left, is in our fridge, which is 40 feet that way. So I forgot the name. I'm sorry. But really good. Little Waves coffee. So to answer the question, I quite like the ET65. I quite like the Weber 12 A125. I quite like so far the Jensen P12Q, and I like the Alessandro. I like the Vintage 30 in a 5E3. The Veteran 30 also sounds quite good. I like the Celestian Blue, but you're kind of asking for it to die in a 5E3. It's right on the verge. I don't like the gold, and my jury's out on the Creamback 65. More to come on that. I'll probably do a video up if I can find where I put my my looper pedal. Could I explain a bit why the phase inverter needs a special tube? Well, it doesn't always need a special tube, but sometimes it can be beneficial to use a long plate tube with a spiral filament for the absolute lowest noise in the phase inverter, because you can get away with it, because there's no microphonics that really come into play in a typical LTP Schmidt phase inverter, which is the most commonly found type, especially for those that use an AX7 versus an AT7, where you can hear noise differences more. Like the Sovtek LPS is a great choice for a Marshall phase inverter, because it's going to give you the quietest performance without any cons. But if you put that same tube in a preamp, it's going to be microphonic because it's a long plate. But you don't need to. You can use the same tube in V3 of a Marshall that you use in V1 of a Marshall. Hey, Bill, what does Deoxit D5 do to pots in a guitar? It cleans them, cleans the contacts, and cleans the track, but it can also dissolve out the lubricant. A lot of pots have a little bit of lubricant in them, which gives it just the right amount of torque and keeps nasty things from happening mechanically. Whereas the F5 fader lube cleans all the contacts that you want, but leaves behind a little bit of grease. So it might displace a little bit of grease, but it adds a little bit back. It's good for the purpose. I use the D5 when I'm cleaning the contacts on a jack, for instance. I use F5 if I need to clean a pot. Never ever use WD-40. But if you have already put some D5 in a pot and everything sounds fine, everything still is fine. It's not going to nuke a pot. It's just, it's better practice to use the F5 than the D5. Hey, Dave Castro, never heard of Frenzel amps. Sorry. Hey, Paul Covella. I don't remember the name of it, but if you search drums 120 beats per minute, drums 90 beats per minute, odds are the guy will come up. You know, he's just playing a good feeling. You know, 4/4. He's got some in 3/4 and stuff, and 6/8 and all that. So it's just a drummer playing a pretty basic beat well for like 7 minutes at whatever BPM. It can't be hard to find. Anyway, it's a great thing to practice too. It sounds a lot nicer than stuff. Yeah, you can improve the MOD doesn't really need it so much. It's the ones made by Belton Accutronics, where they've got a quick connect at the transducer, and then off the quick connector are these tiny little wires that like to break. But because it's a quick connect, it's a little bit tricky to solder. You pull the quick connect off and you can solder to the pins on the transducer, which are sticking out for the quick connect. It can be done. And then you can put some silicone on the wires. So once it sets up, it's going to not tug on them so much. There are things you can do to make the Belton Accutronics better, but they're just not designed well. They're not designed from a real world use perspective. From my perspective, and I hate the plastic RCA jacks they use. It's just the enshittification, you know. It's just one more thing that used to be good that now isn't, because someone decided they can make more money selling more of a shitty product than they can selling fewer of a good product. MBAs, man, what you gonna do? Thank you, Mullet. Appreciate you there. Hey, Brad, thanks for joining us. Hey, David. No. I always check Mauser and DigiKey for manufacturers' KiCad stuff. And then for things like tube sockets and stuff, sometimes you can get that. Sometimes you have to just measure what it is, or take the measurements off the data sheet and make the library part yourself. In my own KiCad designing, I've not had to make too many components that are much more complicated than, hey, here's where the holes are. These are the size of the holes and the size of the pads. Here's the lead spacing. Here's the outline of the component. But, you know, Brad has certainly done the Belton sockets, both octal and novel, and he might be kind enough to share his KiCad parts library with you. So reach out to Brad. Brad, this is David. David, this is Brad. Brad's Guitar Garage, Rhythm and Bites, both good guys. And I know that Brad's got some real nice components he's made, because he's doing the Marshall JCM 2000 boards, the FM, the FYM boards, and he's got a big order. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say, have you already announced it, Brad? But he's got a big order from an American parts distributor for those. So there's some light at the end of that particular tunnel. And I'm glad for him and for Michelle, because he's put a lot of work into that project. And a lot of people out there are suddenly popping out of the weeds with Me Too boards. Oh, good. It's all announced. So yeah, a C distribution, which is a big win. But a lot of guys out there making JCM 2000 boards, and they're shit. They're just shit. They're expensive shit, or they're proudly cheaper than Brad's, and you get what you pay for. I know exactly what Brad's doing on his. I know what all the parts are, why he chose them. He had me and a few other friends go through to make sure he hadn't missed anything, and he had not. He just nailed it. It's a much better board than Marshall ever made, and his over-expensive, inflated price is cheaper than what Marshall was selling them for. So, you know, fuck the world, man. You want it right, you pay for it. You get one guy doing them by hand the right way, from Australia to distributor in Arizona. You're going to pay for that. And in a perfect world, Marshall would have sent them out for free, and Marshall would have made them right to begin with. We don't live in that world. In the world we got, Brad's your best bet. And he's a good mate. Let's see. Let's see. I'm trying to find the next question. I think I'm to where we were during the break. People talk to each other, which is good, but I'm just trying to find the questions. All right, here we go. Hey, Rashad, what's my take on breaking in new electrolytic caps? I don't break them in. I'd power the amp on. If it's a new cap, and I did it all right, I just, if I have a totally new build, yeah, I power it on with the bulb limiter, but there's no forming of a new cap. You don't have to bring it up slowly or anything. I'll use a bulb limiter just to save myself a dollar fuse if I get something wrong. But yeah, if I'm replacing two caps in an amp or whatever, I just fire the fucker up. If I'm building an amp for the first time, light bulb limiter. After I've done a visual inspection of everything a couple of times as I build it. And like I said earlier, the big thing to watch out for is, hey, new build. Let's hope the transformers are in the correct orientation. Let's connect the negative feedback. Okay, good. Or, oh my God, turn it off. Do I have a favorite Bassman head circuit? Well, my favorite that I do is the preamp, slightly modified AB165 preamp into an AA864 phase inverter, because that kind of gives the best of all possible 60s Bassman worlds. Depends on what you want it to do. I've also got a 61 or 62 Bassman up on the channel that I called Wrecked Bassman. It was someone's kit build that wasn't very good. So I turned channel 1 into a train wreck for the owner. And that was a lot of fun as well. If the audio was cutting out, leave and come back. I'm pretty sure that it's good here. Let's see. Check, check, check. Check, check, check. Check, check, check. Why am I not hearing anything? Did I have that turned off? Let's see. Output. Oh, it's off. Okay. Check. Check. Yeah. Hey guys, no political arguing with each other, okay? But the audio's fine on my end. So if you're having audio issues, leave the stream and come right back. And make sure you click on the live button so you're not a few minutes or seconds behind. AC568 drip edge is pretty much the same as AB165. I've got tons of videos on that, but give it the AA864 phase inverter. Even if you don't change anything else, you'll be much happier. Hey, Ma'am Troth, can I talk a bit about what's happening in a deluxe reverb if you pull V1 and put a 12x7 in the phase inverter? Curious about how I would describe that. Thanks. We're going to have a little bit more gain out of channel 2 because channel 1 and channel 2 both share a cathode, resistor, and capacitor on their second stage. So V1B and V2B are both sharing the same cathode, resistor, and cap. So if you have two stages sharing that 820 ohm resistor in parallel, each one's equivalent to 1.5 K, and each one's equivalent to being bypassed with a 10 microfarad cap. Is that right? Yeah. And if you were to change that, you pull V1, V2 all of a sudden has 820 ohms all to itself, and the 22 to itself. So it has more bass, though it's in such a low frequency point, you're not going to hear that part of it. But it's going to have a little bit more gain, just a little more gain. There's also some local negative feedback stuff that we're not going to get into because it's not that apparent. So you're going to get a little more gain out of V1 if you pull a little more gain out of the second channel, the reverb channel, if you pull V1. Not a huge amount. If you put a 12x7 in the phase inverter, you're going to get a slightly dirtier output section. It's not going to be louder. It's not going to sound magical, but it'll have a little less headroom and a little more compression. And you might like it. It's safe to do, but it's not the traditional sound. Do the larger electrolytic caps sometimes take a few seconds to form or charge up? I remember powering up my amp after a recap and there was silence momentarily. Well, no. A brand new cap which has never been charged does take a little bit of time to charge up, but by a little bit of time, I mean an amount of time that you cannot perceive. They have a rise time as they come to full charge, which is, in terms of the full charge, might be a second or two. Depending on if it's tube rectifier, it's going to rise at the rate the tube rectifier warms up. If it's solid state, it's going to be less than a second for it to fully charge. As far as forming, don't worry about forming. Forming is something that form people like to talk about. Probably something else in the amp going on, and you just ascribed it to new caps. No offense. How necessary is it to use a standby switch in a Marshall JTM45 reissue? I had some problems using it. It's because of the question. Hey, Fernando Casado. It's not necessary to use the standby at all in a JTM45 so long as it has the tube rectifier. Usually a JTM45 has got a GZ34 rectifier tube. So the standby switch is not only not necessary, it's not doing much of any benefit, but people associate standby switches with higher end models. So the consumer association is, oh, this amp has standby, it's professional. Even amps that don't need standby, like the JTM45. If I had a JTM45, I would never use the standby switch unless I needed to use it for muting the amp on stage in between sets, in which case, me being me, I might repurpose it to be an actual mute switch rather than a glorified mute switch. But if you want to use it, you can. But if you had problems using it, it could be hard on the rectifier tube. It's absolutely not necessary at all. Hey, Sergio. I see a lot about open backs. I have a couple Marshall 4x10s from the 80s with G10 C35s. Looking for another flavor for one cab for recording. Any 10-inch models I should listen to for closed back use? Man, I don't know. I've not kept up with closed back 10-inch Marshall cabs. I'm, I mean, I like a straight 4x12 Marshall cab. I'll let you get into which flavor you like the best. I mean, there's so many opinions about that kind of stuff. Creambacks versus vintage 30s and all that. So, I mean, I've never played around with the 10-inch Marshall options, so I'm the wrong guy to ask. I'm sorry. Michael Fixit says, I'm always bring up linear power supply, anything that's been off for years slowly on the Variac. Why not keep the poor old things from being hit by full working voltage while they, I'm going to say it, reform? You can say anything you want. Linear power supply, anything. If I have, we'll explain my point here. I was talking about about new caps not forming. New caps don't form. They do, well, technically they do, but not in terms of I need to do a process and bring them up slowly from 0 volts over the course of 45 minutes to 3 hours while playing a waltz. People put all kinds of mojo on that. If I get an old amp in and it's been sitting for years and it still, I can see it still has the original caps, yeah, I'll bring it up on a Variac. I'll have a current limiter and I'll bring it up on a Variac. So that if it begins to have a short, I see the short before it becomes a colossal fail. I see the short, you know, I'm at 80 volts on the Variac, and the current limiter bulb starts to go bright. I'm like, oh, I'm glad I didn't just power this thing on, because that's when you have fire. But at no point during the entire process, if I have an old cap, say I've got an amp from 1954, like that. I actually do have an amp from 1954. I've got that 5C3 Deluxe from 1954 and 1955. It has one original cathode electrolytic. If it had the original filter caps, I would have brought that up very slowly on a Variac. But after reaching 114, 120 volts with the Variac, I would not say, and now those caps have been reformed and they can be used another 20 years, because that's bullshit. It doesn't magically wet the electrolytic again. It just meant that those caps withstood full voltage for a while longer, and they have not dried out to the point where they're going to catch on fire yet, but they may be a week away from that. You don't know. But by bringing it up slowly, they don't reform. They don't magically fix themselves. They're not self-healing. They could die the next time you power the amp on without a Variac. Or 6 months down the line, or 6 years down the line before they fail. There's no way of predicting that. But by bringing it up slowly on a Variac, you are not reforming that electrolytic. You're not guaranteeing any longevity. It's just as likely to catch on fire the next time. It's just a matter of being safe to make sure that there's not an immediate failure when it's on your bench. Are there any mods for a Fender Showman 1966 without doing too much to the circuit? If any, would be using a 12AX7 or AT7. Yeah, if you put a 12AX7 in the phase inverter, the amp will have a little less clean headroom. If you have a 1966 Fender Showman and you're not happy with the way it sounds when it's working right, if it's working right, if a tech's gone through and say, hey, yeah, this Showman's doing exactly what a Showman ought to do, and you want something different, it's a valuable amp. Sell it to get something else that does what you want it to do. Don't carve up the 66 Showman to make a different amp. The Showman's a really good amp. It's a Fender Twin without reverb. There's a reason it was very popular, especially at the time when Marshalls were the fashion, but were so expensive in the States. You could also have a stack of dual Showman, which were also very loud and impressive on the stage, especially when they're 8 feet tall and with silver grill cloth. But I would not mod a Showman. If it's not the right amp for you, sell it and find the right amp for you. Here, Beer Bulldog 6G3. Is that the deluxe? Is that the 62 deluxe? I'm sorry. It's hard for me to keep track of the 6G this, all that. Every time you see me put that on a video, I looked it up pretty much. I mean, I've got some things I know, but is 6G3 the 62 deluxe? As far as recommending a speaker, pretty much the same answer I gave to the 5E3 deluxe earlier, with the caveat that Sir is putting a V-type, Celestion V-type, in their Ombre, and that also sounds really good in that amp. And I thought it would be a poor choice until I spent more time with it, and it worked really, really well. Oh man, making a simple, proper circuit out of a Mesa Mark II. Could be worse, could be a Mark I, could be really worse, and could be an SOB. But man. Yeah, all right, same answer that I gave for the Tweed Deluxe earlier, um, with the addition of that Celestion V-type being a good option as well. It's a nice amp. It's kind of a one-trick pony, but it's a hell of a trick. It's kind of amp I wouldn't choose to have except to round out a collection. If I already had a whole bunch of more versatile amps, that'd be a great addition. It is a great amp if you really love the sound of ZZ Top's first 2 records. I mean, really love it, because that's what it does. You get a 335 or Les Paul plugged into one of those, and that's what it does. And then if you want it clean, you use a Tele, and that's cleaner. Hey, there's nothing wrong with using a Variac, Michael. I use them all the time. I've got this AC50 going into a Variac because it needs to have 114 volts. But I just see so much mythology about, I reformed these caps now, and so the amp is fine. I'm like, no, that's not how electrolytics work. It's chemistry. It's not voltage. Brad could explain it better than I can. Brad always has the tech speak. He's much better at the jargon than I am. Trouble is, no one can understand a word he says. Hey, Gregory Nickerson, going to the store to buy my first tube amp, used Vox AC30C2 this weekend. Very nice choice. Is there anything I should bring along to evaluate it before to make sure it works properly? Well, it's always good to bring your own guitar, if the store will allow it, to be sure that you like the sound. I don't think there's anything else to bring. It either sounds good or it doesn't. Now, make sure that if it's used, that it has. What's the best way to put this? That it's not been beat up. And you just look for signs of abuse. But it's a pretty bulletproof amp. The most common issues that amp's going to have, that most people will encounter, the input jacks can get loose. You can finger tighten the input jacks if they've not been stripped. That's something to check for. Turn the nuts on top of the input jacks by hand. They should get to the point where you can't turn them anymore. If they keep turning and keep turning and keep turning, someone has cranked them down with a power tool and stripped the plastic threads. That's fixable, but get a discount. The tubes that those come with from the factory are usually pretty shit. Get a new set of JJs. It'll cost you about $200 or less total, and transforms the sound of the amp. Now, that the amp may sound good as is, because it may have already had some of those tubes replaced. It's really hard to see them. Oh, a thing that a lot of people don't realize on those boxes, they come from the factory with the tubes coming down, and the tubes have some retainers, and those retainers go over the little glass nipples of the tubes, and over those are little black plastic things that have shrunk. That's just heat shrink. And so if you change a tube and you lose that, or it won't go back on for whatever reason, you can get some 1/8" heat shrink, slide it on there while you're holding it up, about 6 inches away. Use a hair dryer; it'll shrink onto the tube. Then just snip it 1/8 of an inch longer than the little nipple extends, and voila, you've recreated the factory little things. It just keeps the shield, this retainer springs from coming loose on the glass. And that's all it is a little bit of heat shrink. I use a heat gun, but a hair dryer will do the same job, just a little less time, a little more time. Sorry. Man, yeah, I was joking with Brad about this. Was it yesterday, Brad, that we called, or the day before? Anyway, Brad's had a 0 success fail rate on testing his amps, and he's built a full test rig for the JCM 2000s, where it's the full amp, and he just plops the board down and plugs the quick connects, and he's got it all worked out. He's been so good at the assembly and checking as they go that they've had no failures. I ordered 4 or 5 of those boards from Marshall when they were available, and of the 4 or 5 boards I ordered, 2 of them came from the factory. One of them came from the factory with backwards caps. Another one came from the factory with caps that were had that much air gap between the cap and the board, and all kinds of glue making up the gap. I mean, so Marshall never cared. Why should Brad? Right? Isn't that the lesson to be learned here? Hey, Joe. Yeah, if the circuit doesn't match the silk screen, that's a big old issue, and we've all run into that kind of stuff. Josh Roberts, who are you booing? Thank you, Arnaud. I have just a second. Here it goes. I'll pop you up here. It is very much appreciated. Thank you, sir. You say you were in France. Did you say where in France you are, Arnaud? Sorry, France. Well, I'll wait for him to respond. I've always wondered, why is it that we're allowed to say France, but they say France? Why is it that we say Germany, that they say Allemagne, but the Germans say Deutschland? Toulouse, nice. It's so strange to me that we have names for places that are not the names. Like when I went to Lisbon, and I get to Lisbon, and everyone there says, "Welcome to Lisboa." Or I go to Florence. I'm walking around in Florence, and welcome to Firenze. It seems that the person who lives in the place should be able to say what goes on everyone else's maps. Us and the French should be able to learn Deutschland. We should be able to learn France. It's just weird how many. Fuck off, Brad. We have so many wrong place names for countries, cities, states, regions, and it just seems so arbitrary. It's not hard to say Lisboa, but no, we're Lisbon. I mean, some of it I get. Like if you're in Montmartre, it's much more fun to say Pig Alley than Pigalle. But and if you go there, it kind of is Pig Alley to this day. All the sexodrome signs. It's the only tacky part of Paris that I found. Anyway, Paris, for instance. Yeah, Livorno and Leghorn is like Pigalle and Pig Alley. I get that, but I don't forget. I think most modern Scots and modern French have never known, but yeah, I've done too much Shakespeare not to know my 100 Years' War history, and later, all up with Bonnie Prince Charlie and all that. Let's see. Thinking about a blonde Tremolux. I saw me do a playthrough with no commentary. It's cheaper than the basement. Can I speak about the tube? Hey Sergio, I don't remember that video. Blonde Tremoluxes are nice amps. There's nothing wrong with them. but I don't have any memory of that amp in particular to speak beyond that. Pretty much all the Fenders from '62 on, except for the ones with the harmonic tremolo, are very much alike. You know, you have the ones that don't have reverb, you have the ones that have reverb. Then you have the Bassman, which is kind of its own thing, but after the AB165, they were all the same until you came with the Bassman 100 and Bassman 50, in which case they were just really kind of like the dual showman with some ultralinear stuff going on. There are not that many variations of Fender. The Blonde Tremolux is capable of being a fantastic amp, though. And if it's cheaper than a Bassman, you'd probably like it. It's certainly not as loud as a Bassman, and I mean that in a good way. Let's see. Do I ever use that heat-resistant branded sleeving on components? It's anything like the old style. No, I use a heat shrink, or I'll strip some insulation off a Teflon insulated wire and then slide the Teflon on, like on the. You can't see it on the other side of the filter caps on this AC50 because the main filter caps are external to the amp, which would be illegal today. The positive leads to the axle caps. I didn't want to trust to just some heat shrinks, so I took some 20 gauge Teflon stranded wire and stripped off the jacket and slid that jacket over there, so it's robust. And I didn't do that any installation on the ground because it's ground. Hey, Troopin'. Your DSL-40C sounds like crap, like too much low end in the preamp, less gain, no punch, splitty, started with a noisy. Okay, nothing looks damaged on board. You are probably describing that you have one side of your output is not working. It could be a bad output tube, could be a bad phase inverter tube, could be a problem in the phase inverter circuit. But what you're describing is the sound of one tube clapping, basically. You're supposed to have a push side and a pull side. You have just a push side, or you have just a pull side. That's probably what's going on. Now you can sort that out real fast. Plug in a guitar. All right, about to say, plug a guitar into the power amp. That'll rule that out. If that's ruled out, I would have to have your amp to troubleshoot it. Beyond that, enrolling preamp tubes maybe. Something could be off in that. It could also be that conductive glue, which is beginning to strike on that series apparently. But your symptom does not tell me a specific common issue with that amp. And Brad's got some more recent experience with that model. He might have some ideas. You know, you've already plugged in a modeler and everything's fine. That rules out my theory on the push-pull thing. But your description made it sound like the output side. All right, and Brad's saying you might have the conductive glue, and it just kills me that after I recommended the DSL-40C and CR in the amps under 500 video, subsequent to that video coming out, 4 years subsequent to that, now I think that issue, that glue has started to become conductive in that series, and I could no longer recommend it. At the time that I made the recommendation, that had not become a problem yet. And again, in a perfect world, Marshall would fix that for everyone and apologize to everyone, because they'd be so afraid of getting a class action suit. But no one ever does any consumer protection in this industry. So, small company does it, they go out of business. Large company does it, they just keep on doing it because it's good for the profit margin. And I say small company. Dave Friedman is a relatively large company by boutique standards, much larger company than I'll ever be. If he did that shit, he'd go out of business within 3 months. People would spread the word. No one would buy any more Friedmans. That'd be it. He'd be stuck with a bunch of stock he can't sell. Marshall does it. They just amortize it. They write it off of this column, and it's a tax credit. And all the MBAs think that they're clever, and life goes on, and everything sucks. Sorry. Dr. Gear, our friend Six down in Australia, I think just showed how to remove the glue on the DSL-40C. Imagine that's a lot of isopropyl alcohol and a dental pick, but maybe a heat gun was involved. I haven't watched it, but Dr. Gear is on YouTube, and he just showed that that I don't know if he has a video showing how he did it, but he has a video or a short up or a picture up I saw the other day with showing that he did remove it, and it did remove without any permanent damage. So check Dr. Gear 6's stuff after this. He's sometimes on these streams, though it is awfully early in the morning for him. Yep, this. Welcome to the state of the industry. Ooh. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Hey, Troopin, 6's photo of a 40C or 40CR, I think it was, might have been 100. It had the glue corroding the leads of one of the dropping resistors, and it all cleaned up, at least according to the pictures I saw. Like I said, I saw that 6 posted that. I did not click on it. I apologize, 6, if you watch this, Dr. Gear. I don't watch every video that any other person puts out on amps. I only watch all of my videos because I have to. I don't find amp videos particularly interesting because that's my day gig. I'm much more interested in photography and history and art and travel. Channels that I watch a lot for entertainment. Casual Geographic. If you guys don't know Casual Geographic, it's a wonderful series. Young guy, really funny, really tries to present good information in short bites, and I just love everything that kid does. I really love Zafranc, but that's he's very well known at this point. And America's Test Kitchen's a little bit, Claire Saffit's quite a bit, and I can't remember her name. My favorite chef used to be on Epicurious, whatever, who split off on her own. I'll think of it on the next break, and I'll get back. But yeah, I watch good cooks, not cooking shows. I'll watch Alton Brown, but I won't watch anything hosted by Alton Brown on the Food Network. But the people who are actually doing this stuff for real now are my favorites. And I'm glad you know Casual Geographic, Brad, because otherwise you needed to. All right, went over the hour again, so we're going to do our second of 2 intermissions. Where's the thing to take off here? All right. I removed it for broadcast, but I almost hit ban. Troopin, I almost banned you by mistake. I want you to know if I ever ban you, it will be a mistake, but it's possible. All right. Tasting history is okay, but sometimes he's just going for gross out stuff, and so it's not as interesting as I'm like, I know that would have been horrible. It's why they called it the plague. Anyway, I'll see you guys in 7 minutes. Carla Lally Music is who I was trying to think of. The other cooking show I really enjoy. I like the way she cooks. I like the way she presents information. For a matter of fact, it's all stuff that she's cooking at in her kitchen that people would actually want to eat and can afford the ingredients for. And it's not, hey, what can we do with these mystery ingredients, or hey, we have to have a $400 cut of meat or anything. It's just good stuff. A lot of good stuff out there, and I appreciate everyone's recommendations, and I will go back and check some of these. Let's see. I'd love to see Greg play live. He's a remarkable person in many ways. I enjoy listening to him play. I love listening to him speak. If I watch too many of his videos, I try to do what he does and be that kind of guy. And I don't know if I can be that kind of guy, but I'll give it a try. But he's really on. When he's on, he's on. And when he's not, they don't put it out because he missed that one. You know, that's the thing about having an editor. But he is infectious, and he's a phenomenal player. And I'm a pretty big guy. I was talking to my buddy Clint about this, who's also about my size. We're both about 6'2". And we're big guys in normal scheme of things. And then Greg's just like this monster, Goliath with a Telecaster that disappears in his big paws. But you have to be very, very polite about and to Greg, because he is also, as I said, a giant and could smash you. Though I think he probably would not, because he's probably too nice. But maybe we just get his good side on here. But yeah, if I watch too many of his videos, I do try to bring the humor maybe more than I'm capable of. There are days that I can get that. There are days I'm there, and there are days when it's just not happening. And I assume Greg has those days too, and he just doesn't roll the video because he's smarter than I am. But I just put the video out anyway, and here we are. Good, and you just called me Kyle. I saw that. You called me Kyle. You motherfucker. I'll get you. Vivaldi from Quebec. I'll check that out. Well, thank you, Joe B. I don't think I am that guy, but I have aspirations. But he's a bigger man than I am. And I don't say that very often. But, someone please talk me off the ledge of building an amp with built-in harmonic, tremolo, and reverb. I will talk you off the edge before you build it. Make sure that it's worth the effort. Beg, borrow, or steal a Strymon Flint, because it does both those things. And it does the harmonic tremolo particularly well. And it's a much smaller footprint, but you can build it. The issue of building an amp with the tremolo and reverb is that you're going to need an awful lot of tubes, and real estate becomes a premium. And at the end of the day, you could just build a non-reverb Fender, non-tremolo Fender, say a Showman circuit with a very high quality effects loop, solid state or tube buffered, and then put a Flint or a similar pedal in the loop and have all that without trying to get this much stuff into this much real estate, because then you end up like Mesa and things are layered and stacked and too close to each other and just a nightmare. But, it could be done. Rest in peace, Kyle Bush. I don't know who that is, but my condolences to him and his family. Solder conundrum. I'm wondering what type of solder to use on a new 5E3 build. Heard bad things about lead-free solder, but I think refers to using on existing lead. What solder type is best? The solder that you have is usually the best solder to use. I use Kester 6040 leaded solder because I know it's always going to work, and it works really well. I tried the 6337, and it had a bit too much excess flux for my taste, though it made really pretty joints. The joints with the 6337 are gem-like, but it sprays out a lot of excess flux that I had to clean up, so I stopped using it. As far as non-leaded solder, there's fantastic non-leaded solder out there, but it costs a lot more. And so the good lead-free solder is expensive, and most manufacturers today don't use the good stuff. And so we have stuff that doesn't hold up to vibration and heat, which are two of the main things you find in a guitar amplifier. So an awful lot of stuff on the market today is made with substandard lead-free solder, which kind of makes all lead-free solder look bad. It's not. There are other issues with even good lead-free solder, such as tin whiskers. I think that for our purposes of soldering amplifiers, which vibrate and there is heat, that leaded solder is still the best choice. I'm environmentally aware, and my theory being that if we build it right with leaded solder, it is much less likely to ever end up in a landfill. So we're not putting the lead into the landfill, at least not for many more decades, compared to using cheap lead-free, in which case the lead-free solder will go in a landfill within 5 to 10 years. So, you get what you plan for. But, even NASA's having issues with lead-free solder. The really good stuff that we can't afford, they have to use it, but in space especially, that stuff develops dendrites, tin whiskers, and they're doing a lot of research into that. I don't know what brand to tell you for good lead-free solder. Brad probably has that for you. I think if Kester makes one, I'm sure it's a good one. But I just use the Kester lead-free. The Kester 6040 leaded. And the particular one I use is linked in the description of all my regular all my regular videos. On the live streams, I don't have all that stuff, but in my regular videos, it's under the description, everything I usually use. Yeah, silver is very expensive. Yeah, and has gotten more so. I was kidding there, Gooden. I figured I got autocorrected. You got autocorrected. I'm sorry, autocorrect doesn't like me. There are many instances of autocorrect not ducking liking me. Is it okay to blow a fan onto the back of a tube amp? I have a fake Crate Vintage 20 that runs a bit hot, and do I like the Crate amps? I think the Crate amps from that period are really sleeper amps, really good. I like the Vintage 20 series a lot. The only downside to blowing a fan into the back of your amp is that the back of your amp, including eventually your tube sockets and your pots and everything, will get a lot more dust in it than it would have otherwise. Some of the VC20s are really hard to reach because the cabinet is built in such a weird way. You kind of have to just kind of pray that you get the chassis in the first time, and there's not a lot of airflow. But they don't run hot to the point of self-immolation like, say, a Matchless does. So it won't hurt to run a fan on the back of your amp. Just know that you are going to be moving more dust into places that dust would not have naturally gone. Yeah, 6'7" is remarkably tall in real life. I don't look up to many people, but I would look up to Greg. And he would look down on me for many reasons. You should have gone. Though I don't like Daryl Hall's affect in those videos. He's always injecting himself too much into other people's songs, and then he sounds like Hall & Oates without the oats. Well, excuse me, Gooden. I was not trying to get down the whole rabbit hole of the difference, but there are both those things at play. Hey, Sun Tzu, yeah, give me a call after the show. I want to know how things are going with your Vox Tremolo Saga. Should the front panel of a 6G6B have extra air inlets, like a few holes drilled? The original is more of a frame with grill cloth. No, not all. And I apologize for not seeing the first time you asked if I missed it. I try to see them all, but sometimes I miss them. I apologize. No, don't modify Fenders with extra air inlets. They don't need it. Well, they are that as well, John. They are that as well. And now we know how old we both are. I never enjoyed playing The Legend of Zelda, the original. I liked Link to the Past, but Link's Adventure, but eventually you're just doing the same thing over and over and over again. Link to the Past was when it got real good. And Ocarina of Time is probably the best video game ever. Oh man, yeah, it is depressing when you hear someone who's just an absolute monster like that, and they're nice about it. Sons of bitches. It's like Eddie Van Halen, just humbling everyone back in the day with the big old shit-eating grin on his face, not because he was better than the rest of us, but because it was fun. It was fun for him. And you'd see Eddie with that smile, and you're like, I want to go to there. That looks like fun. That looks awesome. He was just so good-natured about it, and Greg's got that in his own way. But, I saw Stevie Ray Vaughan live a few times. One night, very memorably, he was playing downtown at Mud Island Amphitheater back when that was a thing, outdoor show. And to get back home, I walked across the bridge, across the river to get home. Not the full river, Wolf River here. But anyway, I'm walking across the bridge, and I'm remembering everything he just played while singing. And I just felt like taking all my guitar picks out of my pocket, just throwing them in the river and selling all my guitars, because I could never do that. But instead, I bought a big black hat and a Strat just like his, and just played that for 5 years. I'm kidding. Obviously, you've heard me play. I don't have a shred of that in me, but part of me still understands inclination. The same thing as watching Eddie with that shit-eating grin in the Hot for Teacher video. It's just, that looks like fun. Aside from obvious problems, how often should I take an amp in for service? Just got a Freeman, Jose. I want to make sure I take care of it. Hey, thank you for the super chat. Not that often, man. And if you buy your tubes from a good vendor, like if you get a pair of JJEL 34s from Tube Depot and they say 29 on them, if you need to change them out, you can just call Tube Depot and say, I need some more EL34s rated at 29, and then you don't have to rebuy us. 15, 20 years, if it's, especially for a new amp like that, 15, 20 years, it depends on what you're doing. If you're about to go on a world tour, 4 months before the tour starts, you have a guy like me go through everything you own and all your backups. Most people aren't playing at that level, and amps, most things that go wrong with tube amps are tubes, and most owners can replace those. So 15 years, let's say 15 years. If it's a really old amp, every 10 years maybe, just to make sure. Depends on what was done. That's one of the things that people don't understand. They'll see an amp come in, and I'm doing all this work on it. And I'm doing what I consider generational service, the stuff that needs to be done every 20 to 30 years. And if they'd had their work done incrementally by other techs, a lot of the stuff I do wouldn't have been necessary, but the amps just sit there for 20 years. And so they need if nothing's done on an amp for 20 years, all that stuff needs to be done, at which point it's good for another 20. The other issue is, all right, well, this guy changed out one filter cap. Well, no, now they all need to be changed. I'm not going to have 4 caps from 2026 and 1 cap from 1987. Before it had 1 cap from 1987 and 4 caps from 1962, whatever. But, if you're going to change electrolytics, change all the electrolytics. So they're all from the same era. And you can say, all right, this was done in 2017. I'm not going to worry about it until 2032 or whatever. How can I keep my JTM from 60 from running so hot the board doesn't get messed up? Hey, Blue Strat Man. Well, it's really tricky on the JTM 60 because they really wanted that amp to catch on fire. That amp's got a rectifier bridge built onto the board that absolutely kills the board, just roasts it. And the solution is to get an 8 amp rectifier and bolt it to the chassis. So the entire chassis is a heat sink for that rectifier. And it's tricky because the chassis on the damn amp is like Swiss cheese. But, you know, you find a spot for that rectifier to be bolted to the chassis, and then you run leads from there to the board. So the really hot thing is off the board mounted to your steel or aluminum chassis. I don't remember which. And then all that heat's off the board. The other issue with that amp is it has all the spaghetti leads going everywhere, and the whole board slides in a little slot. One of the worst design amps in history. But you move that rectifier, and that bridge is like $4. It's no big deal. And the amp's going to be much happier. Hey, Flesh84, I'm sorry. I saw you asked about 5150 while I was on the break, and I thought I hadn't gotten to it yet. You just asked it again. If I missed it, I apologize. I'll get to that. Sorry. I may not have gotten to the first time you asked it. If I missed it, I will get to you on the second one. Man, Brad, if you ever saw the Wolf River here, some guitar picks were the least bit of litter in there. It's so full of everything, you know. Almost made a bad Jeff Buckley joke. But that's where he drowned. But yeah, a couple guitar picks would be the least awful thing in the Wolf River, which empties into the Mississippi. But I did not litter. I don't know whether it did anyone any good that I kept playing guitar, but let's see. Man, talk about a bad day to be Randy Hansen. Yeah. Yeah. A young Stevie Ray Vaughan with something to prove? Yeah. No prisoners. That's funny that Pastor just said, I take no prisoners. But same phrase. Very different context, apparently. Well, the trouble with Tommy Emmanuel, Alex, is that he's just as goddamn good on electric. He just doesn't play electric as often because he can't accompany himself as well with electric. I think he enjoys the dynamic range and the challenge of acoustic. I bet Greg Koch or Koch or however you want to do it. The big Koch could do it just as well on acoustic too. He's one of those freakish monster talents. We made all the Koch jokes last week, but no. I thought we'd made all the Koch jokes last week, but we're always going to have big Koch jokes here on this channel, apparently. It's just those German surnames. No, not at all. We were going to, but then America went and fucked everything up. So Brad's not feeling like traveling here. And I can't afford to travel to Australia right now. But at some point we will. We have to at some point, right? But no, just in cyberspace, which is a phrase we don't hear as much anymore. Hey, Flesh84. Heard me say 5150s aren't that well built these days. Are there any years in which they were? Thanks. Two-pronged answer. The PV 5150s were infinitely better built than the Fender EVH 5150s. But the PV 5150s are not particularly well built. It's just that the modern Fender branded EVH ones are utter crap. The PV is a bad, cheap copy of Soldano SLO, built as cheaply as possible to sell as many as possible, and it has a lot of flaws. And whoever is designing the 5150 for EVH/Fender said, Oh, I can make it much worse than that. Watch this, and I'll give it MIDI at the same time, and channel switching with this and that, all kinds of bells and whistles. So it's just icing the turd, and they're horrible. Meanwhile, if you want to sound like the records he was doing at the time at 5150, just get an actual Soldano SLO, not the 5150 model. But if you must have a 5150 amp or an amp that says 5150, get the PV version, and you can save a lot of money if you get the PV version that says 6120 or whatever, as opposed to the 5150. After Eddie left the company, they kept making the amp just with a different model number. I can't remember what it is because it's like 6550, but it's not, and 6550 is a tube type, but same circuit, actually with a few improvements. So it's not that any of them are well built, but the PVs are slightly less shitty than the modern ones. And the what's the budget one that they got out now, Brad? The Iconic series, yeah, the 5150 Iconic series. It's a race to the bottom, man. Martin, I appreciate you being here. That's very kind of you, making time out of your week to be with us every Saturday, and you're always I always look forward to seeing your thoughts on things. Hey, Mr. M8279, what are my thoughts about Tonex pedal? I keep getting asked that. I own one. I use it sporadically. I intended on using it more. I've got right down there. I've got HX Stomp and I got a Tonex, both of which have their uses, and I thought I'd use them more than I do, but I don't find them good enough to be enjoyable for me to play. They're fine. They sound pretty good at certain things. I find the Tonex particularly maddening as far as getting the levels dialed in, because this company did a capture at +8, and this other company did a capture at 0. This other company did a capture at -4, and so in order to make all three of those captures sound good, you have to constantly change the input level of the Tonex. It's just a deeply flawed system they've come up with, which is, it sounds like I'm overreacting. It's such a basic premise of any digital product that you need to know what your levels should be, and that it should be in relation to something. Like if I'm on here with my mic pre and Logic, I want to have, as I speak, let me check my peaks here. As I speak, I'm getting average of -11, -12 for the voice on that channel. That's -11, -12 in comparison to digital 0. If I play guitar, I'm at about -6 on the peaks. Those are actual levels which have a meaning. And so if this were Tonex and I played in here, instead of having the guitar peaking about -6, it might say 4. It might say 12. It might say -4. It's not in relation to anything in the real world, anything scientific. And so it's really hard to get consistent sounds out of the Tonex. But you can get very good sounds. But at the end of the day, if I have to have an amplified sound, almost any real amp sounds better than the best models I found on HX Stomp or Tonex. Now, if I were trying to do a record and I lived in an apartment building, I'd make these fuckers work, and you'd hear it, and if I did my job right, you'd say, that sounds great. But it's an awful lot more work than it needs to be. And honestly, some of the, what's that plugin I have on this thing? I'm not going to turn it on right now, but I've got a plugin on here called Neural Amp Modeler. It's free, runs on Logic and other DAWs. Neural Amp Modeler. It's I find it much more universally useful than the Tonex stuff for getting sounds, because you can get actual models of amps to use with it. I've got an AC-15 on here, and it sounds much, much better to my ears than the Tonex or the HX Stomp get. But I'm not. I'd have to spend 5 minutes configuring this for you to hear. Maybe the next stream I'll just do the whole stream with the neural amp modeler AC15 direct gen, because they understand how levels work, and the HX Stomp has a hiss, a digital hiss, a noise floor that's way too high, like most digital pedals for guitarists are, which drives me nuts because there's no reason for them to be noisy, but they are. All the reviews say they're all phenomenal and flawless, and you can sound just like Player X. In fact, they'll be glad to sell you their own models so you too can sound like Van Halen too. And there'll be entire streams on, these new models. And there's not too much new in it, not too much that impressive. And the thing is, if you get into it, if you're not rolling your own, you got to find one company whose Tone X captures you like, and just stick with their captures, because they're going to have some kind of consistent level. So you're like, all right, with a Les Paul, I need to be at 0. If I switch to a Tele, I might want to go to +3. Then all this company's captures will work and sound pretty good. But if I go to a different company's captures, I may not get any overdrive out of anything, or I may be too hot on everything. And it's not really all the different people doing the modeling or the capturing that are at fault. It's the core concept of the Tone X not having any reality-based level. Drives me nuts. How do you know if your tubes need rebiasing? Well, there are a couple of ways, Alex. Well, first of all, if they start to glow cherry red, they're too hot, or for some reason they're drawing too much current, turn the amp off. It may be bias, it may be the bad tube, maybe something else. Second of all, if all of a sudden your amp starts to have hum that it didn't have before, that's often a sign that one of the tubes is drawing more current than the other tube, or less current than the other tube, depending on your perspective. It's like Obi-Wan, depending on your point of view, in which case you're not getting common mode cancellation out of your output pair or output quad or whatever. That can be a sign that one of the tubes is bad. Or the amp can just start to sound a little bit anemic, and you're like, oh, okay, for whatever reason, this thing's idling at 28%, and it used to be at 50%. Either something's changed in the electrical circuit, or your tubes have drifted in a weird way. But tubes rarely need to be rebiased. They usually, you bias them, and if they stay steady for an hour or so, they're going to stay working just like that until they die, in which case you get another pair of tubes, you may need to rebias the amp then. But remember what I said, if you buy like the Tube Depot tubes that say 39 or 27 or whatever, you get new ones that say that. Or the even if you get from CE and you get the Apex matching, they'll have a transconductance number and they'll have a bias number. So you can say, hey, I need to get another pair of those, and here's what the transconductance number is, and here's what the bias number is on these old tubes, and they can sell you a pair. You just pop right in without rebiasing. $611, Jesus. How do you even find shoes? Does anyone have any reliable surplus suppliers for amp parts? Man, I never look into surplus suppliers for amp parts. The only surplus supplier I ever use is Apex Junior for wire, because he buys bulk wire, and you can get some really nice stuff from Apex Junior for that. But I've never bought any parts from surplus. Hey, Flesh84. Yeah, just electrolytic caps are designed to work because they have a wet layer. And if no voltage is in the cap, if they never expose to voltage, eventually they will dry out. So eventually they'll dry out. They won't be capacitors anymore. Bad things happen. So if you just say, I'm not going to play this amp for a while. It's too loud for home. I don't have any gigs coming up. Just turn it on for 30 minutes or an hour once a month, just to keep the electrolytic caps wet. Won't hurt anything, won't run up your utility bill. The amp will last a lot longer. But if you don't do that, It can be every 2 months if you want to. But if you don't do that and the amp ends up sitting for a year and a half, and then you take it to a gig, you're asking for problems at that point because the cap could dry out. It's not a guarantee that it will dry out, but if exposed to voltage, it's less likely to dry out. Remember, forming a cap does not magically add the wet electrolytic back to the cap. You can't put it back. But if you keep the cap exposed to voltage, it's less likely to dry out. Is it relatively easy to add gain or tighten up an SLO 100 for a more modern sound? Well, a couple things come to mind. First of all, the SLO 100 is a modern sound. It kind of invented the modern sound. Maybe you're looking for a postmodern sound. In terms of adding gain, it's not so much a matter of adding gain, it's a matter of which frequencies are getting the gain. There's a 2 nanofarad bright cap, which adds a lot of mids. And that's one of the perceptions. People think the SL100 is soft because it doesn't have a very crisp definition as a result. You take that out and the amp gets warmer, but it's still not crisp. You change that value for a smaller value, like 500 picofarad, then all of a sudden you're going to have that little bit of an edge that I think is what's appealing to you. As far as the tightening up, I think you're referring to the lack of a resonance control compared to some modern amps and modern cabs, postmodern amps. I think a lot of that is best done with microphone choice and mixing and compression in the mix. But the SLO 100 is not designed to be a rhythm amp for really fast rhythm stuff so much as it is for leads. 5150 is not really any faster, it's just brighter. 5150 is brighter than the SL100, and the 5150 adds a resonance circuit, but you're $3 in parts and 30 minutes of mods away from making an SL100 more of what you like about 5150, but no amount of parts or time can make make a 5150 into an SLO unless you just want to spend more than it would cost just to buy an SLO to begin with. But yeah, you can revoice an SLO 100 and kill any dual rectifier or 5150 ever made. Just a matter of a little bit of voicing changes. Oh, the main thing about Warren Haynes' amps is that bright cap taken out. If he has anything else done, I don't know, but it's a very simple circuit. If you take your amp to a good tech, any of us can say, all right, what are you hearing? Play for me. What are you hearing that you don't like? That right there, let me see the guitar. That right there, all right. Well, let me fiddle with this. Try that now. You like that now? All right, there you go. $80. It's not a lot. It's not a lot required to tighten things up or loosen things up or however you want to phrase it. Make it more green, man. The B100 Deluxe is fantastic. It's really well built. It has more options than I think most people need, but that's part of its allure, is that it has so many options. You could do an entire record's worth of leads with that, and every track could have a different lead sound. I think that's the appeal of it. Fortunately, though, you don't have just like a forest of switches on the front, because some of the switches are on back, some of the switches are on front. It's not over the top. it's not, nothing about the circuit is crammed in, and you can always go into the lower gain. It's not low gain, but the lower gain input, and essentially just have a really good 2203 with some flexibility. I imagine if you had a B100 Deluxe with cheese, you would probably say, "Oh, it can do all these things, but this is what I like. I like this. I'll never change it again." Or occasionally I might do there because that's my other sound I like, and that you just so all the possible options go away. Those are the two things you like. That's what's useful to you. Someone else might have completely different settings, but they otherwise use the amp the same way. It's a very good amp. It is not an amp that I would ever need, but it's not an amp that I have any complaint about or criticisms of. Hey, yeah, Alan. I think Luke is a much better person now that he doesn't have the silver spoon around his neck. I think the '80s were a tough time for a lot of people in the industry, and he seems to have come through better than many. And I don't know him, and I'm certainly not going to speak ill of the guy, but I've heard some stuff from the '80s, which is in direct contrast with the stuff that you hear these days. Maybe he's just got a better publicist now. That's also possible. Possible. Like that. I don't like cock with a hard sound. I don't like clearing my throat around that word either. I just want to keep all those words separate from each other when it comes to me. But, not that there's anything wrong with that. All right, we're almost ready to wrap up. Oh, God. Jeremy Montgomery, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, probably Cramelin. People used to use that shit all over the place. Could be worse. There were worse trends. The best thing to do is it's a pain in the butt. Remove all the knobs and the hardware and get the pots out of the amp. The pots, wipe most of it off with Q-tips or paper towels. Make sure you don't get any fibers from the Q-tips down in the pots. And then spray out the pots with F5 Fader lube from Deoxit and just rotate the pots a lot and hope that all that Cramelin's left. As for the rest of it, lay it out as much as you can. Get the board lifted up so it kind of comes up out of the amp a little bit, and just soak the ever-living shit out of the whole thing with isopropyl alcohol. Yours is a 69, so a 66, so it's going to have the white labels on the Ajax caps. Don't get the alcohol on those labels. It won't hurt them. They won't peel off, but they will slightly discolor, and they may or may not go back to being as white as they are now. But everything else, especially any exposed cloth wire, the board, you can just soak it in isopropyl alcohol and wipe off that gunk as you can with a paper towel and repeat the process, and you'll get there. It's all recoverable. And if you get a little bit of the alcohol on the white labels on your Ajax caps, don't panic. Just don't touch them, because if you touch them, the ink will smudge. Just let it evaporate, and you'll all be well. But yeah, man, I hate that crap. I have heard something about the new Friedman Phil X 100 watt amp. This guy called Plump Weasels asked me if I'd heard anything about it, and in that moment, I have heard anything about it. That's all I know, is that Phil X is also one of those personalities. He reminds me of Captain Caveman. Hell of a player, though, and I'm sure Dave's done something nice for him. Hey, 74 Canal. 76 Master Volume Pro is usually, well, crunch with what? Crunch with, a Les Paul? Yeah. Crunch with a Strat? No. Is it supposed to be a nice overdrive? And it's just horrible. Usually it's nice. Usually it's a very late, not great overdrive, but not horrible. But I don't know what's going on with yours. 76, is that on the 76 Pro? I think that's the ultra linear, and they got that big 30-watt dropping resistor. Those things are notorious for getting crumbly over the years, and you could have all kinds of issues. But the core of the amp is easily restored. But I'd have to have your amp in front of me to give you more advice than that. It should be a late breakup amp that wants to stay really clean for a long time. Hey, Merrill. No breakthroughs. I mean, aside from the background hum and the cable getting wrapped on the guitar stand, it sounds like this. I forget how to play. So the amp's got some promise. And the next box of goodies from Mauser should make the last of that buzz go away. All right, let's see. Hey, Sergio, my Fender Super 6, that's a loud amp, has intermittent fluttery crackle noise through the speakers when on, even if the channel volumes are all the way off. Do I see this often? Yeah, it could be tubes, could be noisy resistors, could be DC on the board, could be lead dress, could be dirty tube sockets. That could be a lot of things, none of which are scary, none of which are hard to fix. It's going to be a little bit scary because it's a Super 6, so all those little crackles are loud. But, pull the tubes from the input side working towards the phase inverter one at a time. And if all the crackle goes away when you pull V4, hey, there's a clue. Or if all the crackle goes away when you pull V3, there's another clue. If the crackle is still there after you've pulled V6, the phase inverter, then you got a problem in your output section, which is also sounds scarier than it is. Yeah, never let your tubes watch Fox. Let's see. What does it mean when a tube is microphonic? What causes it? It means that if any vibration of the tube is sent into the audio path and you hear it. So it actually acts like a microphone. It's got a diaphragm. The part inside the tube which vibrates is the diaphragm, and it turns into an electrical signal which gets amplified. What causes it? Nothing lasts. Nothing that we build in this world is ever bulletproof. And when you have little bits of metal suspended in a vacuum inside a piece of glass and something goes wrong, it'll often rattle. And when it rattles and it becomes something that you hear, sometimes it's just a slight ringing in the background that you can't quite put your finger on. Sometimes it's oh my God, listen to that. When you experience a really microphonic tube, you will know. And at that point, you'll recognize it. Thank you, Jay Martinez. Appreciate you. Just got a JC120 from a storage unit purchase. Should the clean sound just as awesome without the chorus engaged? Does sound as full? Does or does not? It should. It's a good clean sound with or without the chorus engaged. And then with the chorus engaged, it's the same clean sound on one side and a slightly modified version of the clean sound on the other side. And hopefully it's not going to go too much. Most JC120s do. I need to get to the end. I think I got another super chat to get through. Yeah, sorry if anyone's questions got skipped. I need to wrap this up for the week. But thank you very much, Plump Weasel. It's very much appreciated. You guys talk about owls now, so I guess I'm not that interesting. Okay, your Pro is not ultralinear. 5U4 rectifier. All right. Hey, 74 Canal. Don't worry about the 100 nanofarad caps or the 0.1s versus 0.047s. Worry about the input to the phase inverter. I've talked about this so much I don't even want to talk about it again. But the 10 nanofarad cap on the input to the phase inverter, change that to a 3 nanofarad, 0.0033. So a 3 nanofarad, a 3.3 nanofarad, which is the same thing as a 0.0033 microfarad cap, and your flub will go away. And make sure that the bass pots are 10K audio, not 10K linear, which is one of the things they might have had in 76, which also gives you artificially flubby lows. Ears 4s, best mics, IRs, tubes. Well, that's not a question. That's an incomplete statement. Best mics are the ones in front of Ella Fitzgerald. Okay. I'm not sure what 22 has to do with anything, but it's always fun. Anyway, I got to run. I enjoy doing this with you guys mostly every Saturday. I enjoy it every time that we do it. It's not most Saturdays I enjoy it. I don't always get to do this with you on Saturdays. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your continued support. Thank you for making it entertaining for me. Hope it was entertaining for you. Hope maybe if you weren't careful, you might learn something. And that's the only Bill Cosby reference I'll do this week. Now I'm depressed.